Hey, my pod people, Kate here. Glad to be with you today to talk about circadian rhythms and how finding a rhythm in your daily life can improve your moods, your sleep, your digestion, and just about everything. I also want to talk with you today about how the pursuit of a healthy daily rhythm is not only a scientific endeavor, but also a mysterious and magical process that is governed by celestial bodies such as the sun and the moon. Let's get into it right after this. Welcome to Everyday Ayurveda with Kate, a podcast that translates ancient wisdom for modern lives. I'm your host, Kate O'Donnell. I've been living and teaching Ayurveda, India's traditional medicine, for over 25 years, and I've authored 4 best-selling books on bringing Ayurveda practices into our lives. If you're tired of battling digestive issues, hormonal imbalances, menopause symptoms, or are seeking a deeper spiritual connection and purpose, you're in the right place. This podcast is for you, offering practical, accessible advice to help you heal through diet, optimize your daily routines, and enhance your overall well-being. Follow this space for insights on a diet that heals, strategies for better digestion, sleep, hormone health, and direction for finding a deep sense of meaning and purpose. Join me, my pod people, for this empowering journey into self-care and self-discovery. Together, we'll explore how to bring balance and vitality into your everyday life. Let's do this. While we often think about the modern science surrounding circadian rhythms as having to do with our body's natural leaning towards things like sleeping at night and being awake in the daytime, Ayurveda texts describe the Aditya's celestial bodies, like the sun, moon, and planets, as astral beings who have great influence over the relationship between the humans and our cosmos. These celestial beings take on symbolic personalities and energies in ancient myths, and they are centers of influence in Vedic astrology. Planetary, solar, and lunar bodies are big players in the makeup of not only our universal substratum, but also our bodies, and have become symbols of the energies that guide us, drive us, and mire us through life. So while we can start by talking about the pineal gland, we're going to end up talking about the moon. I love this journey because so often when we start thinking about health and healthy living and changes we want to make, it can get very serious, right? Very quickly. And what I love about the Ayurveda perspective is that there is magic in it. Although it is a nature science, there is also, especially as we lean over into yoga and tantra, very much a mystery and a magic to the energetic realities of consciousness and prana, or the life energy that moves in the body. And our body is very much governed by light. And the pineal gland is that which sort of responds to whether it's daylight or nighttime. So when it gets dark, right, your body will start secreting melatonin and it's time to go to sleep. And this happens because of the pineal gland, which is interestingly located in a direct plane. If you were to draw a line down from the crown chakra and straight back from the third eye, or sort of the space between the eyebrows, you would run into the pineal gland. And so from a point of a biological evolution, the pineal gland is like an atrophied photoreceptor, right? So kind of like existing in some species of amphibians and reptiles, it's like a light sensing organ. So some consider the pineal eye to also be a third eye of a sort. And the pineal gland is shaped like a tiny pine cone. So that's where it gets its name, right? Which is kind of cute. And its main job is to control, as I said, circadian cycle of sleep and wakefulness. And I think you've also noticed this, but I really can't say enough how important that cycle is. A lot of people are struggling with sleep and with feeling alive and awake when they are awake. So if there's anything we want to try to do, it's to sleep better, right? And to feel more rested after sleeping. So, the way that I'm looking at this is Ayurveda has a daily clock, right? So, we look at a 24-hour cycle, and there's different physiologies that naturally want to happen in the body based on where the sun is at that time of day, such as when we eat and when we sleep. These things are natural. And when we live with these natural rhythms, we sort of live in accordance. It's like you're rowing your boat along with the stream, right? And you're sort of buoyed up and carried by the energy of the life stream that you are a part of. When we start to move in ways that are different from those natural cycles, like say eating at, late at night or staying up late into the night and or sleeping in the daytime, while it's fine if some of these things are happening sometimes, when that is our daily routine, it's like you're rowing your boat backwards. And eventually it kind of breaks you down and makes you feel tired. So I think a lot of us are feeling that way. And there's something to be said for aligning the body with nature's rhythms as a way to feel more alive and also more connected. So that's where what we're talking about today. Yes, it's a life science and it's a spirituality as well. And I really want to keep weaving that thread through our conversations because I do think a lot of us are looking for more of a feeling of connection to something greater. And that is potentially the best way to feel healthy, is to feel like a working part of the life stream. And so, a very practical way to begin to do that is to learn about the Ayurvedic daily clock. This is called dinacharya, and dinacharya, it means sort of like a daily routine or the way the day goes. So the day goes in accordance to sunrise, sunset, moonrise, and moonset, let's say. And all this has to do with the spinning of the planet, right? So wherever you are on the earth, you are experiencing these cycles. And due to our pine cone shaped gland there behind the third eye, we're responding. The body's responding to that light. Light is a really big part of this story. So when the sun rises, the day begins. And that is a time where there's a lot of moisture in the body. You might feel a little mucusy some times of year, especially. And that's as we rise, because the body's been still. We've just been lying there. So there might be kind of like some heavy qualities in the body. And then we start moving. We start moving around and we move towards the zenith of the day where the sun is at its highest. And so the metabolic fires in the body are also at their highest around midday. So we could say something like, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., middle of the day. Ayurveda considers that an ideal time to have some lunch. It's a great time to digest and assimilate food at midday because the sun is at its highest. And the mirroring of that in the human body is to have an increased metabolic fire and digestive fire. So it's a great time to eat and better time than night, which we'll get to that in just a moment, why that is true. So as the day goes on, we're sort of in an active cycle. And then as the twilight comes around, the light becomes less. The body responds by starting to feel tired and starting to get ready for sleep. So you can see where that would not be an ideal time of day to eat the main meal because the body's getting ready for sleep. And what the body does during sleep is detoxification. So if you listen to our last episode on toxins and digestion, this will ring true yet again. Another piece of the puzzle around improving our digestion is about what time of day we're eating our food. So as the evening comes around, as the sun sets, the body starts to get ready for sleep. And actually between around 10 p.m. and 2 a.m., right? So kind of nighttime into the like dead middle of the night. That is the time that the body does detox. In an ideal biological rhythm, there would be no food in the belly at 10 o'clock at night. So that means you probably don't want to eat much later than 8 p.m. Or a rule of thumb to reach for is considering 2 to 3 hours between your last meal and bedtime. And that allows the body to sort of work the food through the stomach, as we talked about in detail in our last episode. Work the food through the stomach and get it going through the small intestine and into circulation. And then while you're sleeping, the body is going to do detox. And when you wake up in the morning is the ideal time to pee and poop because that's when the body wants to get rid of stuff. The morning is also an ideal time for a little sweat. So a little exercise in the morning is a fabulous daily routine. Doesn't have to be every day, but let's say half the time or 60% of the time. And that is going to help the body push the wastes out through these channels of excretion, the poop, pee, and sweat. Right? So we want that stuff moving out in the morning. And the body sort of preps it all while you're sleeping. So it's like imagine, all the kids go home from school and then the janitor can come in at night and clean, right? Because it's empty. So ideally, you want your stomach to be empty around 10 p.m. And also, ideally, we want to be sleeping around 10 p.m. or at least the majority of the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. detox time. If we can be sleeping during that time, then that's ideal. It's ideal for your body to detoxify from the metabolic processes that happen during the day. So your body does detox every night. It's a magical, beautiful thing that whatever's happening all day long, your body's just going to clean up house right at night. And then in the morning, we have the sort of removal of wastes. So some of our morning routines will include scraping the tongue. The tongue is the beginning of that digestive channel where so many of our solid wastes are removed. So we pull that mucus off the tongue rather than swallow that back into the stomach. We drink a little hot water to clean the pipes. Imagine cleaning your sink, right? You wouldn't use cold water to clean the sink, right? To clean the pipes, you would use hot water. It definitely cuts mucus and grease better. So we'll drink some hot water in the morning. We will potentially do some exercise, induce a little sweat if that's appropriate. We might do an oil massage followed by a hot shower, which also sort of cleans the sweat pores as well. We definitely want to pee and hopefully poop in the morning. That is the ideal time. And that's because, as I said, the body detoxes while you're sleeping. So if you're awake between 10 to 2, you're definitely rowing your boat upstream. So if you're used to going to bed at, say, midnight, getting to bed by 10 is going to take some time. One thing you could try is moving your bedtime back in 15-minute increments about every 2 weeks. So take your time, right? Give it 3 months to get yourself back to a 10 p.m. Your daily rhythm is a matrix where you change one thing and everything else starts to change. If you change what time you eat lunch, your hunger for breakfast and dinner are going to shift as well based on that one change. So rather than trying to do everything or do it all today after you hear this information, you want to kind of just try for one thing and move towards it in small increments. That is the way to make the change towards this fantastic rhythm of being asleep around 10 o'clock at night. You want to go to bed earlier? Great, go for it. Because ideally, the great time to get up is with the sun or even a tiny bit before the sunrise. So the 2-ish hours before sunrise are considered the Brahma Muhurta or God's time. And that is a fantastic time where the mind, you will find, is very clear. And it is a wonderful time to connect. Great time for spiritual practice, reading of inspirational texts, prayer, also any kind of meditation or any kind of mindfulness activity that you might engage in. That's the great time to do it And if you're trying to gain clarity around a decision and you really want to tap into your intuitive self, you will find that a lot easier during those morning hours. So that's a fantastic tool. You don't have to get up early all the time forever always, but there might be periods in your life where you're feeling like you need to tap that clarity. You need to get into that intuitive space, or you need more of that spiritual energy in your life. So you will find that easier before the sunrise. It's not the only way to do it, but it's just a hot tip coming to you from ancient times, right? That God's hour is actually before the sunrise. And then once the sun rises, once we wake up, you're fair game. Life starts coming at you, or you start coming at it, depending on how you do things at this stage of life. So once you start moving, there's a lot more action, there's a lot more activity. And that's why it's a great time for sort of exercising and eating and working, right? And all these things. And nighttime is the time for sleeping. We have this sort of solar energy and lunar energy, which in my podcast episode on hormone health, I did talk about solar and lunar energies and how important they are in the balancing of our hormones. So, this conversation about circadian rhythm and its effect on hormone balance is actually huge. And there's so much to engage with here. And you will find that things like mood, sleep, digestion, and metabolism improve when you sort of are eating and sleeping and exercising in accordance with these daily rhythms. So, as I said, that will take some time. Another aspect I want to kind of talk about today is how do we get more lunar energy in our bodies and in our lives? Because if we want to stay in balance, we do need to balance the energies. And the energies that are at the center of the human, according to this Vedic philosophy, this way of looking at the body, is that we have solar energy and lunar energy, and that these two are opposites that balance each other. And they are always in conjunction with each other, just in the way that the celestial bodies of the sun and the moon exist in a balance together in a 24-hour cycle. Because we live in a solar leaning culture where productivity and activity is favored over quiet time, rest, and rejuvenation, we tend to need to think a little bit more about lunar energy and how do we get lunar energy in our lives. So while we can talk about daily rhythms and when we eat and when we sleep, I also want to talk about the moon. I've spent many periods in my life living close to the ocean, lucky for me. And one of the things I've noticed, especially I lived in Hawaii for some years, and that's a place where it's an island in the middle of the ocean. So the effects of the ocean are very strong there, and it would be like if the moon was full, you could hear when it was high tide because the waves were that much stronger. The moon energy was very strong there, and its connection to the tide was apparent. It would be like, don't park your car on that road near the beach when there's a high tide on the full moon, because your car will get flooded, right? And if it's not the full moon, maybe we don't have to worry so much. So there is this effect of moon on water. Moon affects the tides. It affects the higher tide. The high tide gets higher when the moon is full. And biodynamic farmers will plant seeds around the full moon. And this is because the moon pulls the moisture to the surface of the soil and makes the seeds easier to germinate because they want that water, they want that moisture. So this is something that biodynamic farming has been around for millennia. I don't know about millennia, but definitely centuries. And this idea of the moon affecting bodies has also been around for a very long time. And when we see, I mean, those of you who live near the beach, you know what I mean. You know that the tides are higher. I've had a lot of ER nurses and doctors approach me after hearing this from me and say, I had somebody tell me recently, oh, all the ER nurses, everyone always tries to get the day off on the full moon because it's crazy. And people are trying to avoid the insanity of being in the emergency room on the full moon. And I've heard the same from midwives who say there's always more babies born around the full moon. So the full moon has that sort of energy that pulls, it pulls things to the surface, pulls water to the surface. If it's affecting the oceans, then how could it not be affecting our bodies, right? Another great example is the lunar rhythm of a menstrual cycle. So a lunar cycle is about 28 days, and a menstrual cycle is around 28 days, give or take, let's say. But in general, it's around the same kind of number of days. And many women will notice that their period will align with a full moon or a new moon, at least at times in life. There's definitely, that's such an amazing thing to notice in the body how the moon and the sun are affecting us. So you can feel when your appetite changes due to the sun, like a really cloudy day, you're not as hungry. It's a little damp. You can feel with the menstrual cycle, you can notice this, you can track it, be aware of the moon days and what the menstrual cycle is doing. And it's this thing that it just links us to this cosmic principle of movement in nature that is affecting our bodies. It seems obvious, when we talk about it, but it's one of these things that we forget. We forget this all the time. And our mission towards health and towards balanced moods and restful sleep and good digestion, it all starts to feel like it's our job, right? Like it's this thing we have to do, and then we're bad because we don't do it good enough, and it's our fault, the digestion's messed up or the hormones are messed up or whatever it is. Where indeed, what if the foundational principle to our health and wellness had to do with our interconnection to cosmic principles, or feeling connected to or in a flow with a part of the cosmic principles? I think for some people, this may come naturally, that feeling of being connected. And depending on how busy you are, what stage of life you're in, it can be more difficult to feel that feeling of interconnection with nature. And lunar rhythms are a way that we can do that. I really think it's a fabulous thing. We could start by you could just write the full moon and the new moon in your calendar, or have a little dinger that pops up on your calendar, right? That says the new moon is this day, the full moon is that day. I actually noticed that a lot of planners nowadays have the moon phases also in them. And I think that's great, because just having an awareness of when the moon is full and when the moon is new, you layer that into how you're looking at your body. You say, oh, why am I feeling loony today? And that word comes from the moon, lunar, right? So why am I feeling so loony? And then you're like, oh gosh, yeah, it's a full moon. And so the full moon is just like, it's pushing all this energy and pulling things to the surface. And it gives us it gives you more energy. You might find that you need less sleep around a full moon, and that you'll sleep more and deeper around the new moon. These are some of the ways that the light of the moon actually affects us. Not only the light of the sun, but also the moonlight. And the moonlight is seen as one of the ways we could look at it is that there's a nectar in the body called soma, which is a soft and a lunar essence. And it is very much fed by the moon. And moon bathing is mentioned as a therapy in Ayurveda texts, especially in hot weather or in conditions where there's heat. So the energy of the sun is hot and the energy of the moon is cool. If you have inflammation or you have hot flashes or you have a lot of irritability or you have a lot of acid, there's things that are going on that are making you feel hot, overheated, inflamed. Moonlight on the skin and especially on this, say, frontal cortex. So if you can get sort of the fontanelle or the top area of the head and the forehead, you can get the moonlight on that area. That is a cooling influence on the body, and you will notice subtle changes if you find it regularly. If you're in a cold climate, you can still find a patch of moonlight coming through a window. And as you start to pay attention, you'll notice at certain times of year and at certain times of night, the moon is coming through a certain window. And once you know that, then you can kind of catch that moonlight. But getting that soma happening in the body is an energy that really produces a softness, a moisture that give a beauty to the body and also cools the moods, right? So again, if there's like a lot of stress or a lot of anger, irritation, it's this moon energy is really fantastic for that. So knowing when the moon is going to be full and when you can catch that energy is a fantastic rhythm to add into what your flow is like. Just like how eating in the middle of the day when the metabolic fires are higher is a great routine, right, to add into your daily flow. Now, when the moon is new, that's sort of the dark time. It's like the quiet time. It's a great time for sleeping. And you might notice that you have less energy for sort of, let's say, outward pursuits. You might feel a little less like you want to run around or socialize or do stuff. To whatever amount you are able to do a little bit less around the new moon, it will allow for a regeneration period. That's kind of naturally what the nature wants to do. So just like we plant our new seeds around the full moon, because the full moon is going to sort of pull those seeds into growth. So sort of the opposite is true, and it's a resting and rejuvenating, regenerating time around the new moon, the dark moon. So that's a great time to do less, to chill more. You might notice a difference in your exercise around that time. And it is a great time to really focus on rejuvenation and resting. And I think we maybe don't do that enough, right? I think this is a problem that causes a lot of imbalances in the hormones, the moods, the digestion, all the things. I think we definitely see disorders because we don't prioritize rest. So one of the ways to look at that is what's a monthly cycle for you? Like, is there a time of the month where, there's a day, 2 days, even 3 days where you're just trying to prioritize resting, doing less? One of the things, I don't know about you, but I know it's true for me that I have a hard time resting, like allowing myself to rest. Instead, I'm thinking that I need to be doing this and I need to be doing that. But if I sort of have a rhythm going where I know this is the time of the month where I do less and I focus on resting and eating kind of a little more simply, maybe not going out as much, but staying home and nesting, doing activities in the home space, or just lying around, that I feel more comfortable. It's easier for me to do that when it's a part of a rhythm. So then when it's like go time, I'm like, woo, and I can go. And then when the rest time is there, I know this is the time for resting. And so it's easier for me to take rest and more comfortable at that time. And I think it's such a cool thing because we can sort of order our world based on the celestial bodies. You will find that even if, say, you're listening to this today and then you just start kind of thinking about it a little, like it's just there in the back of your mind sometimes. And then you go look at your planner and you're like, oh, look at that. Yeah. The new moon is, at the end of the week. And you think maybe I will just like, try to do less, or I'll just make soup instead of some complicated meal on that day. What you will find when you start making your choices based on celestial bodies, you'll start to feel that there's a magic at work in your life. Where I think a lot of us are moving through life feeling like we're in a rodeo, right? All the time, like we're riding the bull. And what I want for us is to exist in a space where we reach for nature and we reach for cosmic principles and interconnection to help us feel well. Where when you're riding the bull in the rodeo ring, it can be really hard to access that and hard to feel like that's true for you. So simply starting by being aware of when the moon is new and when the moon is full. And that's it. If you're a journaler or a planner person, you could even jot down a note or two around the full moon and new moon. How's your energy feel at that time? What are you up to? Did you feel tired or did you feel amped? What was your exercise different? Any changes in mood, digestion, sleep, exercise, energy that you might notice around those times, and then give it a couple months and then look back for patterns. And then as you start to notice patterns, you're then becoming aware of the effects of the adityas, these celestial bodies on your body.